What is up? What is up? You are listening to the Soul Good podcast. Welcome, welcome. Come on in the room, everybody. Welcome to this beautiful space. I'm feeling so good. This is episode number 2, y'all. So I'm really excited to get into another topic. If you weren't here last week, we talked about self-love, and it was a really good conversation on just kind of diving into what that looks like in the healing journey and how you can obtain more self-love just in your day-to-day. Really good episode. If you haven't, go back and maybe give that a spin. It's a good 30 minutes, but on your way to work or something like that, it's a great listen. For those of you who are new here, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Britani Rose and I am your host. I am a life coach. I'm an author. I'm a mother and a lover of life and all things healing. So this podcast is a space for all of that. And this season, we have different topics each episode that I'll go over and talk about and do the due diligence of explaining what those things really look like, how those topics or how these real life things that we all kind of run into play out in real life in the healing journey and the obstacles, adversities that you face and how to overcome those things. All right. I'm not really going to dibble dabble much. Like, I kind of want to get straight into it because I'm actually really excited to talk about today's topic. It's been a joyous thing to encompass along my journey in life. And so, without further ado, let me introduce today's topic, you guys. So, today we're going to be talking about, drum roll, please. You know what? Actually, you know what? I got something for this. Accountability. Say it with me, everybody. Accountability. Yes. In the building. Yeah, see, last episode I didn't have my noises. Today it's on and popping. I'm about to get my DJ on this entire episode. Okay. So we are going to be talking about accountability, y'all. And if you're still sitting here, don't turn this off. This can be a very touchy subject for some people, but I promise, just stick around and see if by the end of this episode you don't run out in these streets screaming at the top of your lungs, I'm accountable. Like, that's the goal. That's the goal. I want you to take this information and put it straight to use today, this moment, once you hear how amazing accountability is. Okay. All right. So, as you all know, I like to get into definitions. Last episode, I gave you a definition of self-love that was from the internet and I didn't quote it. And it just really ate me up on the inside. I don't like doing that. I wanted to have the place of reference ready. This is not plagiarism. We don't condone plagiarism. However, this was from a publication on crossknowledge.com. Okay. And I really liked this definition because I felt like it was simple to understand. But yes, accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions. Now, y'all know I like to repeat things, run it back for the folks in the back who maybe was passing a vacuum cleaner through the house or dropped a toy on the ground and didn't really hear what word was used. We gonna say it again. Don't trip. Okay. Accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility for one's actions. Now, I feel like the man at the podium who is about to make an announcement. But like, let's just call it what it is, you know. It sounds good. Like, if you were to read this to me, I would say, yeah, it sounds good, because it do. And that's why I picked it, because it makes it seem like accountability is not this huge gut punch sometimes, especially when we're in situations where maybe we didn't do the best we could have done or fell short a little bit. Accountability can be difficult to digest. Additionally, when you're being accountable for yourself, a big part of that is taking a look at things that you don't really want to see about yourself or want to acknowledge, and being able to understand that while those things maybe are painful, or the act of doing that in and of itself can be painful, right? Like, I've struggled with accountability in the past because sometimes being accountable for myself, and even to this day, like I said, this is not like I figured this out and I'm done with it. To this day, I still have a hard time with just being accountable sometimes, especially in places where I don't necessarily feel like I want to go there with myself, right? And so accountability affords me the opportunity to look at those areas within myself. And while sometimes that can be very difficult, it's worth it to me to just be open to looking at yourself, right? And understanding yourself better. In the past, it has been difficult for me to do that as well, because sometimes it reinforces some negative narratives that I've told myself that are not accurate or true. But still, nonetheless, when faced with moments of like disappointing others, or not doing something correct, or moments like that, it does make it difficult to be all in when it comes to understanding yourself. And so I did choose that definition because I felt like it was an easier way to look at accountability, versus taking it on as this intimidating process, right? So, one of the things that I often see with other people, um, before I talk about myself, because I'm definitely going to talk about myself, but I'm going to talk about what I've seen and observed in other people, is that accountability is looked at as embarrassment or humiliation. And I want to let you know that that is actually the furthest thing from what it is. I think what feels embarrassing for people, or humiliating for people, is when there's correction involved, right? Because it's one thing to be faced with a situation where you should take accountability, right? You may have to take accountability for doing something. You don't always necessarily get corrected in those moments. So, taking it a step further, I think sometimes it's harder to be accountable when not only are you having to show up for the moment, but you're having to show up and be corrected. And so when people are in situations where they're being corrected, a lot of us, that like inner child that feels that like scolding happening, and it doesn't feel good. And so I think that for a lot of people, including myself, I've been in that situation where when correction is a part of your accountability process, I think it can be difficult to accept it as accountability without feeling like you, in somewhat sense, failed, you know? My first run in with accountability, real like life accountability that I had to take for myself, the first time that I had to do that was when I got pregnant at the age of 17. Becoming a parent that early has been my greatest teacher of life, because immediately I went from being a young child, or kind of older child, I guess you would say, nonetheless definitely still a child, to having to make not only decisions for myself, but decisions for my child. And that was a very, very, very difficult thing to do, at the age of 18. But just by being able to accept and understand what role I played in that, life decision, and said, consequential things after that, accountability helped me so much, because I'm not going to say I always get things right along the journey. I don't. I still make bad choices even today, right? But accountability has opened up my eyes so much to not just my journey, but others as well. Before, I really just kind of had this like my way or the highway type attitude when it came to how I did things and how I operate. And the lack of accountability to have that mindset, is damaging to your relationships. It's damaging to the people around you, because not being able to take the level of accountability necessary often intervenes with your ability to understand other people's truths, right? And we're not saying that you have to like engulf their truth as your own or that you don't have a truth, but accountability and the ability to harness that as a skill set is something that really can truly help you. And so being kind of selfish like that was something that hurt my relationships more than it helped. Another thing that I really struggled with was um, really just not being able to make decisions for myself. I didn't really feel confident in my choices. It was always like, okay, I want to do this, but I need to call this person. So I would get on the phone and be like, hey, I'm about to do this. And I would have like a committee, y'all, like a choice committee, like 5 people that I would call and be like, hey, what do you think? And after I spoke to my choice committee, then it was like, okay, now I can make a decision, right? And so I wasn't always confident in my ability to make decisions. And it definitely impacted me because I wasn't making decisions necessarily from my authentic self. I was being influenced and allowing myself to be influenced by those around me because I wasn't very confident in my ability to take accountability for myself to that degree. And when it comes to my choices, right? It's one thing to say like, okay, yeah, I might have done this or whatever, but like when you're navigating life and you have to make decisions, because again, that is a huge portion of life. And that was my first lesson was like, oh shit, life is all about decisions. Life is all about decisions. Like, why aren't they telling us this in school? Because truly one choice changed my entire life, the trajectory of my life. And so as I navigate life, still understanding that, taking accountability for myself and then being able to turn that into like power for myself and feel empowered to make my own decisions is what truly has changed my path to go down a different direction. It has been a struggle. I will say that once I started doing it, me and accountability are now like the bestest of friends, y'all. Like, I look at accountability as a tool, a great tool for me to just better myself. And the way that I make it digestible for myself is really just to like remove others from it, because I feel like a lot of times we bring other people into our accountability. Some of us deflect when we're faced with moments where we need to be accountable for ourselves. We're going to turn into somebody else, or we're going to highlight somebody else's role, illuminate exterior factors, when the truth is, regardless of what's happening outside or how much control you have or how much role of you played in what's going on outside of you, there is always something that you can at least be willing to explore about your circumstance, right? And so keeping that mindset has helped me immensely to be able to just even like help others, like for example, like I'm one of those people where I've grown so great at trying to find like how I can be accountable. Not necessarily, I used to go looking, like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna cap. I used to go like looking for things like, oh, something gonna go on. And I'm just like, what could I have done? What could I have done? Now, like, I don't necessarily take that approach all the time, like in every situation, because sometimes things are just, it is what it is, right? But I think in moments where I find, especially that others are affected, I'm always trying to understand, okay, how could I have showed up differently? What did I do? How did I lead in this scenario to get these circumstances back? Like, what was my role? And being able to do that, even when it's not asked or required. Like, sometimes nobody has brought something to my attention. It's not like someone said, you really hurt my feelings when you did that. There are some times when I'm just like, I feel like I could have maybe hurt someone's feelings, right? And now this is something I don't have to act on, but me just being willing to look within and explore that as a possibility and then make a choice to act on it, because sometimes I might find like I don't like the way that I said that. And that's a huge thing for me, because I have a tendency to just say what it is. I'm very blunt, very like direct, and sometimes saying the first thing that comes out is not always the best way to say it, right? And so I found myself in situations where I'm like, I done said something and I'm just like, you know, After some time, I've thought about things and I don't like the way I presented myself. This is not about somebody saying, like, oh, you hurt my feelings. This is simply about me saying, like, I don't like the way I presented myself in that situation. And then I can take it a step further and outside of just me acknowledging that with myself, I can take it a step further and then take it to the other person if I feel the need to do that, right? Now. Heavy on the now, okay? Accountability does not always mean apology. Like, I'm gonna tell you right now, there was two different entities. Apologizing and accountability, they are two different islands, baby. You got to swim to the other one for sure. It's not just gonna come with it. Just because you can be accountable for yourself does not mean that you have the humility and all the other things to go apologize to somebody, because like I've been accountable for myself since I was about 17 years old. Apologizing, me and her just started going together, like literally I would say like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, seriously. Like that was when I first started being open to me apologizing to others, because it's like before I would be one of those like, okay, well, sorry I made you feel that way, you know what I'm saying, like sorry you feel that way. That was me. Like, I'm sorry you feel that way. That was my apology. And like, that's not an apology. If you're the sorry you feel that way type of apologizer, I love you, but you need to up your apologizing game, because that's not a very genuine way to apologize for a behavior that you exhibited. So, what I had to start doing was like, first of all, humble myself and be okay knowing that perfectionism is not the goal. Like, I am going to make mistakes. I am going to F up. I have to be open to the fact that I'm a whole ass human being out here on this ghetto earth link, and I'm doing what I know to do that's best. And sometimes that's not always the best, just because it's my best doesn't mean it's the best. And so being open to uh, that as a reality is very helpful when trying to just navigate accountability, right? Also, this is really tough because people just kind of like break down with criticism in general when it's not warranted, let alone you going out and asking for it. But I promise you, putting yourself in a situation where you're asking questions about yourself in terms of just like, hey, I'm trying to get better at communication, and this is what it looks like, right? I'm trying to get better at communicating. Sometimes when I feel intimidated by conversations, I shut down. How does that make you feel? Now you're giving somebody the floor to give you honest feedback about yourself, right? Now you have to kind of brace yourself for what's coming because you don't really know, but God, it feels good saying that. Like, it feels good saying, like, hey, I don't got it all here right now, in this area. I do want to get better. But sometimes we have to open ourselves to the feedback of those around us. Now, I'm not saying go ask a stranger or somebody who hates on you. Go ask somebody who value their feedback and they're pretty neutral in their approaches or opinions. And just simply ask them, like, what do they notice? What do they see? What do they observe? Right. And now when you get that feedback and you're trying to process it, the number one thing that I'm going to request that you do, ma'am, sir, is give yourself grace. It is very difficult to hear things about yourself, whether it's warranted or not, right? It's very challenging to have people tell you things about your shortcomings and understand that you like my thing, boy, if I hurt somebody's feelings, I'd be so mad at myself, like so mad. So giving myself grace for those areas, understanding that I'm human and being able to take a step back from those moments of intense emotion, right? When you're having to be accountable with either yourself or others. It's real helpful to go into it easy on yourself, not beating yourself up and not expecting you to have this all figured out, because Rome wasn't built in one day, baby. It just wasn't. Okay. This is taking step by step, brick by brick methods to understand how to be better as a human being. And in this case, how to be more accountable. So again, if you struggle with accountability, if it's something that you would like to have more of, in terms of just of yourself, right? Because self-awareness is a huge factor when we're talking about our healing journey. There's not much that you can do if you're not willing to look at yourself. There's not much that you can change if you're not willing to look at yourself. There's not much that you can even just accept, because I do want to kind of move away from this notion on the healing journey that everything has to be changed. Everything doesn't have to be changed. And I feel like having that mindset or mentality really feeds into like the need to be perfect. And, is the goal to be perfect, or is the goal to love yourself? My goal is to love myself. Okay. And if I love myself, then I will think I'm perfect. There are things about me that I necessarily ain't trying to change. Right. But accountability will allow me to just be aware of said things. And then I can say, okay, all right, now that I know that about myself, now that I accept that about myself, now that I am like, I'm grabbing that thing, it was floating, but I'm holding it, right? Because I'm being accountable for myself, the way I show up. I can just accept it. I can just love it, and I can be at peace with it. And that is ultimately the goal when it comes to healing, right? Being at peace. So, with that being said, I just want to highlight the major key points when you're talking about trying to grow and become more accountable. It's, again, a day by day process. But number one, break up with perfectionism, right? Like, completely push that to the side. We have a no perfectionist mindset over here, right? Number two, be open, ask questions, and be okay with constructive criticism, right? Like, you gonna mess up, player? News flash, you gonna mess up. I can say it in my nice voice. I can say it in like my flight attendant voice. Thank you for flying Soul Good Podcast Airlines. This is a message to all of our passengers that you will mess up. But it's okay, because we still love you. And this plane is going to land regardless. Have a blessed day. Wasn't that so wonderful? So yes, with that being said, that marks the end of episode 2. I really hope you've enjoyed this content as much as I have enjoyed creating it for you. I want to take this time to open up the floor to other people, because I'd really like to answer some questions from my listeners. And I would also like to get your feedback. If you have any commentary that you'd like to contribute to the show, this is a more the merrier community around here. So if you have any topics, suggestions, ways I can tweak the show, questions, send them in to me, and I would love to read them. Okay. So the email that you can send those things to is the Soul Good Podcast at gmail.com. If you want to be friends, honey, because I need some friends. If you want to be friends, you can follow me on social media, okay? And I'm gonna follow back. So for this, the podcast, it is at the Soul Good Podcast on Instagram, and my personal IG, which you can follow me there too, and I'll follow you back. My at name is at Britani Rose, okay? So that marks the end of this episode, y'all. I really hope you enjoy the content. Stay tuned for the next topics coming. Podcast drop every week. Episodes come out on Sundays at 1 p.m. Okay. With that being said, thank you again for listening. It has been a pleasure. I'm your host, Britani Rose, and you are watching and listening to the Soul Good Podcast. I hope you have an amazing day. What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for listening to episode number 2 of the Soul Good Podcast. Today, I hope you enjoyed our conversation as we talked about accountability and what that means to demonstrate that for yourself. I hope that after today's episode, you're feeling empowered to take accountability for your actions and the way you show up in this world, as it matters for yourself and for your healing journey. Don't forget to leave us a review on Apple or Spotify, as we would love to hear your feedback about the show. Also, follow us on social media at the Soul Good Podcast on Instagram and at Britani Rose on Instagram as well. We'll see you next week.